Do you want to see the dim-witted, terror-supporting ogre Cenk Uygur get absolutely destroyed on Piers Morgan? Well, this time it's Dinesh D'Souza who has the honor of dismantling this idiot on the question of the ceasefire in Gaza. Take a look.
To you since this peace plan was presented. I read it in detail and I found myself nodding at a lot of it. It seems to me to be the most likely framework to get this war over.
Yeah. So my sense of it is that Trump is actually trying to get the peace. Obviously, he's massively biased towards Israel, and this deal is biased towards Israel, but I would take it. And so now I'm not Hamas, so it's easy for me to say I want the hostages home. I've wanted the hostages home from day one. So in the deal, the hostages get released. Hamas does not rule Gaza. I'm happy with both of those things. But the critical part, Piers, is Israel has to leave Gaza. So right now, what they're saying is, yeah, we're going to get what we want. We're going to get our hostages back, but we're not going to leave. And they claim they're getting a security perimeter, which is just more land. And I told you from day one, this was never about self-defense. This is about land acquisition.
Really? So when Hamas invaded with 6,000 soldiers and armed people, and they massacred over 1,000, and they took 250 hostage from a territory that Israel withdrew from willingly 20 years ago, Israel's reaction was not about self-defense, it was about land. Idiot.
Trying to build greater Israel. So then Netanyahu says yes to the deal because he has no choice because Trump makes him, which I like. Good job by Trump on that. Then he goes home and says in Hebrew, not in English, oh, don't worry. We're going to have the IDF deep inside Gaza. So in other words, we're not going to do the peace deal. We're going to get the hostages back, and we're going to grab as much of Gaza for Israel as we can. So that's the part that I can't stand. If I was Hamas, I'd sign the deal anyway, take Israel's excuse away from them. They've been using the hostages. That's why Netanyahu didn't want the hostages back, because he wanted it as an excuse. But it doesn't really matter, because even if you take that excuse away from him, what he's going to do next is Hamas didn't surrender enough. They didn't turn in enough weapons. I have to murder more Palestinians. I have to ethnically cleanse them more. So when the hostages are returned, Piers, and we come back on here, will you tell all of your Zionist Israeli zealot, yes, okay, you guys betrayed the deal. You were supposed to leave Gaza, and you didn't, so Cenk was right, and all of your critics were right. This was always about stealing Palestinian land. Okay, so that's what's going to happen, I guarantee it. So I just want to set ahead of time so that people don't try to squirm out of it. Oh, no, they didn't turn. They turned in 12,000 guns, but we wanted 13,000 guns. We have to keep murdering. We have to keep stealing land, right? So let's get it clear right now. Israel should get the fuck out of Gaza, and they should end the occupation entirely. Otherwise, they're in the land stealing business, which is what they've been in for the last at least 58 years.
Okay, Dinesh, your response to that?
Well, the United States didn't get the F out of Japan after the attack on Pearl Harbor. This was something that the Japanese started, and the United States not only finished it, but after the war, there was denazification, there was a restructuring of Japan. So I'm just saying that when you start a war, it's not going to end your way. Now, I do support the Trump plan. Through my adult lifetime, I've seen so many bungled peace plans that the fact that this one is kind of close to signature, I think is itself incredible. I think Trump is a real estate guy. He's looking at Gaza and he's saying, I see a bunch of rubble. Why don't we have nice buildings and clean streets and people in suits going to work and maybe a Trump hotel? Why don't we have trade and prosperity? So he's offering a different path to the path that we've seen so far. And on the balance, I think it's a good path. So even though I think for Israel, it's painful to exchange terrorists for hostages, that's hardly a fair part of the deal. But I think Israel is right to swallow and take it. I think also the demilitarization of Gaza and having an international authority mainly made up of Muslims and Muslim countries, I think is a good way to go.
Cenk, the suggestion that Tony Blair might be a leading figure in that has enraged a lot of people. Others say, look, he got peace in Northern Ireland. He's been a Middle East peace envoy. Iraq was a disaster, but everything he's done since has been aimed at trying to forge peace. What's your view of somebody like him being involved?
So Tony Blair is a toady for the Israelis, and that's super obvious, and I'll give you a fact that proves it. Do you know who's funding the Tony Blair Institute to the tune of $350 million? Larry Ellison, the same Larry Ellison who is the biggest charitable donor to the IDF. He gave them $16.6 million in the middle of a genocide. Oh yeah, go murder more Palestinians. Here's my charity to Israel. Go steal more land. So that guy is paying off the guy, Tony Blair, who's supposed to be neutral here. No, he's got 350 million reasons not to be neutral. He's going to be biased in favor of Israel in every way, shape, and form. He has been bought by Israel. He helped to start the Iraq War. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Iraq had nothing to do with America. At the time, Israeli leaders said that it was Israel's #1 enemy, and Tony Blair said, "Yes, sir, absolutely, sir, we'll invade them, sir." And now we're told that he's neutral when he's obviously and literally and empirically bought by Larry Ellison, who's a massively pro-Israel zealot, near lunatic, honestly. He's saying, "Yeah, I'd like to donate charitably to a genocide." It's unbelievable. And so, one more thing about what Dinesh said. So look, these guys always say, "Oh, well, look, there was World War II and we dropped a nuclear bomb." Like, why? But what we were supposed to learn from history. So yes, the Mongols went into Baghdad and killed 800,000 people, every man, woman, and child, about 1,000 years ago. Does that mean we should all do it? No, we're supposed to get better as we go along. And that's why we passed laws after World War II that we should not do indiscriminate mass murder of civilians. And the only country that doesn't agree, Israel. They're like, no, we reserve the right to do mass slaughter of civilians. That's because they're totally outside of the rule of law. They're a pariah terrorist state, and we've got to stop funding them.
There's a debate about the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but even the people who say that that was a bad idea think that there should have been instead a land invasion of Japan, which would have itself have produced untold casualties. So there's no real debate in America. Hold on, let me finish. You keep shouting. Let me finish. So the point I'm trying to make here is when Japan starts it, the United States gets to finish it, and there's no need to have a, quote, neutral authority that somehow neutralizes the influence of the victor. Look, if Israel had carpet bombed Hamas and carpet bombed Gaza on October 8th, they would have gotten away with it. The reason that they are getting all the heat now is they dragged it out. And in fact, they are trying surgically to distinguish between Hamas and civilians, an extremely difficult job to do when Hamas grabs its own mothers and daughters and puts them right in front of Hamas and says, "We dare you to shoot because that's going to make you a murderer."
Cenk Uygur, he just says so much nonsense. Oh, you're slaughtering and the genocide and the this, and he screams it like a maniac. That's why they bring him on, Piers Morgan, by the way. Not because of his great intellect, this great thinking mind, this big head, Cenk Uygur. They bring him on because he gets emotional and he screams, and that brings views. But as he said over there, Dinesh D'Souza, when he said, we haven't learned from history. Yeah, history, actually, what happened in history was that both Nazi Germany and Japan unconditionally surrendered. There was an occupation of the territory afterwards until they rebuilt themselves in a peaceful manner. And I don't know if that's possible in this conflict, but I would say definitely that it's a problem. And I've said it before, that the words victory, defeat, and surrender have been taken out of the lexicon. As Dinesh said there perfectly at the end, there's no reason why there needs to be some type of neutral arbitrator at the end of this war in order to neutralize the influence of the winner, Israel, which is what they're trying to do. All these negotiations are about trying to satisfy some certain things for Hamas, when Hamas should just be defeated. They should surrender, and that's it, and it's over. And then, yeah, Israel can occupy Gaza until a new governance is brought to bear in Gaza. And then Israel get out. Now, Cenk thinks that would never happen because Israel would never do that. It's all about grabbing land, right? For him, it's all about land. And he always says that, even when there's no evidence. So he said in one interview that in 2001, Ehud Barak turned down the deal with Arafat because he wanted more land, which is nonsense. The territorial aspect of the conflict had been resolved. Arafat turned down the deal because he didn't get right of return, as it's called, which would enable the descendants of all those refugees from 48 to have a right forever to move into Israel and thus dismantle Israel demographically, turn it into an Arab state. So it wasn't about land or borders. It was about the existence of Israel. And to call Israel's war in Gaza about land is just it's for me it's just insanity. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005 completely, pulled out, gave up any territorial claim it might have had for Gaza. And I can tell you, as someone who lives in Israel and follows the news, in 18 years after Israel withdrew 2005 to 2023, nobody was talking about expanding territorially into Gaza. Like nobody. I'm talking about the most radical, right-wing, messianic, religious fundamentalists, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, anybody that you want. None of them were talking about Gaza. Yeah, they were talking about Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. There they did want to expand. That's true. But nobody was talking about expanding in Gaza because Israel had pulled out of Gaza. Gaza was under complete control of Hamas. There was no talk about expanding or building anything over there. The only talk was about how to neutralize the rocket attacks into Israel. People weren't even imagining that they could mass invade as they did. It was all about the rocket attacks. That was the only discussion that was ongoing regarding Gaza. After October 7th and the massacre and the kidnapping, and then the war started, which is the most legitimate defensive war that you can have, a few months into that, then the discussion came of what to do the day after, right? So Israel is winning the war. We know that militarily Israel is going to win because Israel is stronger. What's going to happen after the war is over? Then, for the first time after 18 years, some in the more right wing in Israel said, oh, we have the solution what to do the day after. Let's rebuild the settlements in Gaza. Like a minority of people said that. And it was rejected by the government. And Netanyahu never said that was the plan. He said, yeah, we want people to leave if they can. They should be allowed to leave and get out if they're suffering in Gaza. And go build their lives somewhere else. He didn't endorse that plan. The government didn't endorse that plan. Trump didn't endorse it. And it was a minority view. And a minority view that came into being only because the war was launched against Israel. And then there's a question of we can't go back to what was before with Hamas in control. And of course, there's other points in Israel's history also where this nonsense is dispelled. Israel gave up Sinai Peninsula, double the size of the rest of Israel, to Egypt for peace, with strategic importance, Suez Canal, Red Sea, with biblical importance. Israel gave it up. There were some on the far right who didn't want to give it up, to be fair. They said, no, we're never withdrawing. They gave it up. Because when Israel has peace versus expansion, when those two options are on the table, it chooses peace. The problem is that most of the time, that option is not on the table, peace. With the case of Egypt, it was, rarely. So Cenk is just an idiot. He just thinks it's all about land grabbing from the Israeli perspective, and he doesn't take seriously the Hamas ideology trying to annihilate Israel. He doesn't understand that an enemy like that needs to be defeated. You don't need to negotiate with them and give them all kinds of things that they want. And that's why I call him a terror sympathizer, in the end of the day, a terror supporter. But he's also so bad at making the argument. I mean, some idiots like Dave Smith, at least they debate better. Cenk is like a bad debater as well. He's just there to scream like a child so that Piers Morgan can get his views, which is what Piers Morgan's show is really about in the end of the day. That's all for this clip, folks. Like, subscribe at Insightful Nomad, and I will see you in the next video. Yalla, bye.